Okay, hello everyone and welcome to your last video for week 11. You made it, congratulations. And this video covers the rhetorical analysis worksheet that you're required to submit as an assignment for the article, The Lost City That Isn't by Jennifer Raff. Now, one thing I want to tell you about Jennifer Raff that might help you as you fill this out is that she works with hoops. And he was one of the archaeologists that was on the same side as Joyce and Begley. And that should make sense in your head because Jennifer Raff is so against Steve Elkins and Preston and the whole expedition. So it should make sense to you that she works with one of the people you've already been hearing about. You haven't heard a lot about hoops, but you've heard something, he was mentioned. And so Raff works with him, and that is super helpful information because now you understand why she's so angry. She's in that same camp with Joyce and Begley. Okay, so in order to do this presentation, the things that you need are, you need to have printed The Lost City That Isn't. Make sure you print it. It's in the Raff article folder. It's the last folder under rhetorical analysis for this week. So make sure you print the article. You also need to blue sheet this article. If you've not done that yet, you need to stop this presentation right now, read the article, and do a blue sheet on the article. That is step one. I'm gonna go over the answers and you have to turn it in. So I'll know if you didn't try it on your own. If you have my answers, I'll know. So I wanna see that you tried it and then I wanna see where you've corrected your sheet, okay? So print the article, print the blue sheet or make one of your own. You can do it on notebook paper if you don't want to print a blue sheet and they're not going to be blue since you're at home, but do that first, okay? You can also make one on your computer. I don't care if you use mine. You know that these are real general, that's a real general template. So as long as you have the answers to the questions, the topic, controlling idea, main idea, major support, I'm good, okay? So do that first. You also need to have printed the rhetorical analysis worksheet. Again, it's in the Raff folder. You should see it there, so just make sure you print it. If you want to write on it, you can do that. Know that when you turn it in, you'll just take a picture of it and either submit the picture if you can figure that out in D2L, or if you can't, you'll have to paste the pictures into a Word file or something so that you have a file you can upload. Or you can make your own in the computer. I don't care how you do it as long as I get the content that I need and I know you've answered the questions. So again, the article, you need to have that printed or on your computer. You need to have blue sheeted this article before this presentation, and you need to have the rhetorical analysis worksheet in some way that you can take notes and write things down, okay? All right, I think we're ready to start. So the first thing, because the formatting of Raff's article is a little confusing at times, I wanted to make sure that you have the right paragraph numbering. This might actually change your blue sheet. So if you need to pause the presentation here, fix your numbering of your paragraphs and fix your blue sheet, go ahead and do that. But I tried to make sure, I just gave you like the first couple words of each paragraph and told you what paragraph number they are. Raff did a lot of quoting from other sources, and those quotes sometimes belong to the paragraph above and sometimes they didn't. And you really had to watch what she was talking about when she put them in there. So that changed the paragraphing. So this is the correct way to look at it. So just make sure that you renumber your paragraphs and correct your blue sheet before you go any further. So pause it here if you need to. Okay. Now, I'm going to go over the blue sheet. The topic, this one was about Douglas Preston. It was about the expedition. And it was really about science versus entertainment, which is that same tension we've been talking about all semester, right? Because Preston is an author. Of course he wrote the book in order to sell it, right? I mean, that's how he makes his living. So it should make sense to you that he used the lost city of the monkey god. Raff uses the word trope, which you may or may not have understood. A trope is like, well, here she means specifically that Indiana Jones idea, right? Like that there's a lost city in the jungle somewhere, that romantic idea that you can go and you know, stomp through the jungle and find some kind of buried treasure there, right? Like that romantic idea that really propelled this whole story into Preston and Elkin's lap, right? That idea that adventure is out there, that Indiana Jones idea. And so it's really about that, right? Because it's entertainment, because you have Elkins as a film guy, Benison was a film guy, and Preston was a writer that published a book, right? Versus science. And so Raff, remember, she works with Hoops, and remember Hoops is is an archaeologist professor, or a professor of archaeology, like Begley and like Joyce, but also like Fisher, right? So these are all people that are scientists, and it's that tension between how do you talk about things in a way that a lay audience like us would understand, and so that it's about that tension also, and you can certainly see which side Raff is on. So the controlling idea here is that Raff is upset with how Preston published his Nat Geo piece. Now, the piece that she's specifically talking about is the piece that Preston wrote. It's that 500-word essay that he wrote in his hotel room. Do you remember in the book it talked about him getting out of the jungle, going back and writing a press release for National Geographic, and how it was the most popular thing on the planet. It was shared everywhere and was like hugely viral. That's the one that she's talking about. It's that press release that Preston wrote in that hotel room right when he got back from the jungle. That's what she's upset with. She's upset with the way Preston talked about the jungle, the word choices that he used, because again, they're for a Nat Geo audience, they're for entertainment, and they're not scientific or sciencey, and she's upset. So the thesis is stated in the last paragraph of the whole thing. National Geographic and writers like Douglas Preston can write about sensational finds without sensationalist tactics. Writing well about good science is more than enough. Archaeology is exciting on its own without invoking ugly tropes in order to sell ratings. Again, tropes is that romantic idea of like the adventure, right? Okay, so there's the thesis. It's in paragraph 12. Now, the major support should have been grouped as follows. You have paragraph 1, it's just background on Ciudad Blanca. It's all factual stuff, so she started there. Then paragraphs 2 through 4, it's that whole part about what Preston was saying, like, oh, this whole city is lost no more, right? And then it's that paragraph 2. It's one of my favorite lines where it says, but according to Douglas Preston, yes, that Douglas Preston. You have to remember, Douglas Preston has that whole book series with a guy named Lincoln Childs, and he wrote a book called The Relic Hunter. You can see that that's problematic. Raff does not like him. Okay, so she's reacting to, well, this is Preston's words straight from the article, right? And then paragraph 5 is the sarcasm. It's the response to that, because in 2, 3, and 4, she's actually quoting that press release. And then 5, it's you can just hear the tone in it. I love this paragraph. Not just a lost city, an entire lost civilization. Amazing. Fortunately, National Geographic had camera crews on hand for this discovery and put together a National Geographic Explorer program, Legend of the Monkey God, that captured this exciting find, which aired earlier this week. She doesn't mean any of that, right? She's mad about it. She's angry and she's making fun of them. So that's all sarcasm. All right, then she explores the problem. She even tells you, but here's one slight problem. So 6 and 7 go over the problem with Preston's language, okay? And then she goes to 8 and 9, where she says it gets worse. And that's where you have that whole list of word choices from Preston's press release, right? So that lost city, vanished, never, it's all those, okay? So 8 and 9. And then in 10 and 11 is where she kind of pulls back the hate a little bit, and she says, look, I get it, right? I get it. I understand this whole trope, it sells, right? I even like the trope. I mean, she kind of acknowledges that she understands why the trope is popular, and she's doing some acknowledging there, but then she kind of turns that conversation, and she talks about why it's a problem, right? She mentions some of the problems with it, about the hype, about how, like, you know, the whole lost city is not lost to the Peck and Tawakasumu Indians that live there. And we looked at those native tribes in our last academic rabbit hole, so you should have known about them. And then all of that leads up to paragraph 12, which is her thesis. That whole, hey, you can write about, like, in other words, like what the expedition found. She's acknowledging that it is sensational. It's awesome what they found. But you don't have to use that those sensationalist tactics, those tropes, lost city, right? You don't have to do that. You can just say, hey, we found, you know, this city that people haven't seen since Columbus, or I don't know. You could just talk about it in a more scientific way. You don't have to hype it up for an audience. You can trust that it's cool enough on its own, right? And so then that's her thesis. Okay, that's the major support. Check your work, look at your blue sheet, and make sure you did a good job. And please, again, make any corrections you need. I should see the corrections on your blue sheet. I don't care if you know, got a lot of it wrong and are now fixing it all. You need to understand the way that it breaks down so that you can do the next part. If you type this up, just kind of add the correct part in another font color maybe, or whatever you want to do. But just make sure that I can see what you had initially versus what you need to fix, so that I can see how well you're doing on these blue sheets. All right, now the rhetorical analysis part 1, here's where you should have the worksheet out. Remember, your first thing after you put in the title and the author, you need to think about the goal of the text. What is Raff's goal? What's she trying to do? Is she trying to change your mood? Just your mood? How does she want you to feel? Who does she want you to be mad at? That should be pretty obvious, right? How is she trying to change your mind? Is she trying to change your mind? Does she want you to change the way you're thinking? And if so, how? And does she want anyone to behave any differently? And I'm giving you the answer to that. It's yes. Who does she want to behave differently? Like, right? Like, it's about Preston. And so how does she want him to behave differently in the future? So remember that if you have a willingness to act claim, you also have a claim for mood and mind. So make sure that you write down your answers to all of those. I'm not giving you explicitly the answers. You have to do some thinking here. And then you can just copy the claim over from your blue sheet onto the claim section here. So pause the presentation, get this first part of your worksheet filled in. Okay, part 2. Now it's time to look at that claim and you're going to classify it. What type of claim is it? Is it a claim of fact, a claim of value, or a claim of policy? So you want to pick that first, because once you pick that, it then correlates with the type of rhetoric that's used, right? Because claims of fact use forensic rhetoric, claims of policy use deliberative rhetoric, and claims of value use demonstrative rhetoric. So decide on the type of claim first so that you can then classify the type of rhetoric. Okay, next you're going to flip it over and now you're looking at ethos. So where did Raff use argument by character? You need to be thinking about, where did she try to make herself trustworthy? What does she do so that you think, oh, this lady knows what she's talking about, I should really listen to her? Where does she do that? So I want you to list paragraph numbers and explain what you're thinking. You can quote word choices or sentence parts, but make sure you're explaining. You're saying, oh, she did it in paragraph, X because she did this, right? So make sure you explain that on this part, on the ethos part, okay? Pause the presentation, fill that part out. Okay, then we're ready to move on to pathos. Where did Raff appeal to your emotions? Remember, where did she make you try to feel something? What is she trying to make you feel? Anger? Empathy? Fear? Was she funny? Did she try to make you cry? Did she make you laugh? Did she make you scared? Where is she trying to manipulate you and manipulate your emotions? So again, write down the paragraph, write down the word choices. Where is she trying to get you as a reader to feel something, to react emotionally to the argument? Again, pause the presentation so you have time to work. Okay, and then again, we're going to move on to logos. Now, I told you that in 960, we do not expect that you need to do this on your own. So I'm going to give you the logical syllogism and I'm going to explain it. And your job is to copy it down on the worksheet. You are allowed to do that for this. I am telling you to do it. I'll also know who listened to the presentation and who didn't based on who has this written down. So remember that logos is argument by logic. It's a syllogism. We want the major premise to lead to the minor premise to lead to the claim, which is the thesis, right? That's our therefore statement. So you want to think about, I always tell my comp students, I'm going to tell you the same thing. Fill in the therefore claim first. That you know that part. That's the claim. You already filled that in on the front of the worksheet. So it's therefore Nat Geo and Douglas Preston can write about sensational finds without sensationalist tactics. That's your sentence, okay? So that's your therefore. All right, now, to figure out the major premise, you have to figure out on what does the claim rest. In other words, what is Raff assuming to be true? Okay? She is assuming, like, okay, think of it this way. Why does she have such a hard time with Preston's use of lost city and lost civilization and never before seen? Why does she care so much about those word choices? And you should know the answer to that. She cares because what her point is that those civilizations are not lost to the indigenous tribes that live there, right? The Tawakasumu and the Peck Native Americans that are there, they already know about it. And so to say that it's lost is that's still that white European colonialist view. That's why she doesn't like it. We've talked a lot about that in class, so you should be able to follow that, right? So if Ciudad Blanca was never actually lost, okay, that's what she's assuming to be true, that there are people that have always known it was there. So if Ciudad Blanca was never lost, now you need your minor premise. She's also assuming for it to be true that archaeology is exciting on its own, right? And Ciudad Blanca has been studied by archaeologists and locals for years. So you can just say it's been studied before, right? So if Ciudad Blanca was never lost and it's been studied before, therefore, Nat Geo and Douglas Preston can write about sensational finds without sensationalist tactics. Again, your if statement is if Ciudad Blanca was never lost. Your and statement, and it's been studied before. Therefore, they can write about sensationalist find without sensationalist tactics. If, and, therefore. And that completes your logical syllogism. Make sure that's part of your worksheet. Okay, now if you've paused the presentation and worked on this worksheet as I was going through all of that, you should be done. So for this assignment, you have to upload two things. First, I need your completed rhetorical analysis worksheet. You should have both sides done to the best of your ability. And you should also have your blue sheet on the Raff article. You should have both of those done. Again, you can take pictures of them if you've handwritten on the paper and then either upload them to D2L, or if you can't figure that out, paste the pictures that you take into Word so that you have a file that you can upload. And then if you're having trouble with those, you can always make these worksheets online. Now, you don't have to create my little graphics. Again, you can just say goal and then fill it in, claim, fill it in, type of claim, type of rhetoric, right? And then ethos, pathos, logos. You can simplify it so that it can just go on a Word document. And then you can just type it. So you do whatever works the best for you and make sure that I get both of those, the blue sheet and the rhetorical analysis worksheet, put them in the assignment folder, okay? All right, and then please let me know if you have any questions, and then good job. Rhetorical analysis is one of the hardest things we do, so good for you if you felt like that made sense. If you're struggling, please ask for help.